Hello, and welcome to the Drug Discovery World podcast, a podcast covering topics around drug discovery and development, pharma and biotech. My name is Giles, and I'm here to take you through this episode. Today's episode is another bonus episode, but unlike the previous bonus episodes, this one will be based on one of our DDW white papers, and is titled Unleashing High-Throughput Reaction Screening the Unchained Way. At DDW, alongside the articles that feature as the regular weekly episodes, we also provide webinars, such as those in previous bonus episodes, and white papers, one of which will be the focus of this episode, as mentioned. The DDW white papers are provided by our partners and often include case studies relevant to particular technologies in their specialist field. Like our webinar episodes, if the white paper bonus episodes prove useful, then we'll continue to occasionally include bonus white paper episodes in the podcast. There'll also be a link to the white paper on our website, which includes the figures and images in the show notes. So now on to the main part of the episode. Sponsored and provided by Unchained Labs, today's white paper episode is titled Unleashing High-Throughput Reaction Screening the Unchained Way. A successful high-throughput approach to reaction screening requires a rational and systematic exploration of a broad set of variables to achieve optimization expeditiously. There are many types of potential variables that can be screened. Even with the aid of high-throughput screening tools, chances are that it's still unlikely to screen all the possible combinations of reaction variables a process chemist desires. A well-planned high-throughput approach enables scientists to more clearly see the big picture, quickly abandon disadvantaged routes, and rapidly pinpoint advantageous and impactful conditions to focus on. Let's talk about high-throughput reaction screening. Where to start? Before a particular set of reaction variables can be assembled for screening, let's first look back at different scenarios where the decision to conduct high-throughput screening, HTS, comes into the picture. The goal of an HTS approach generally falls into two categories. It might be at the exploratory or discovery phase of the research, where a certain transformation is not known but highly desired. An HTS approach enables discovery scientists to scout out potential conditions more systematically so they can evaluate its feasibility. But more likely, HTS gets called in much later, when a process needs to be optimized to produce higher yields and/or eliminate impurities while examining alternative strategies to avoid costly, toxic, or patented reagents. With the project goal in mind, a comprehensive review of the knowledge base pertaining to this particular transformation comes next. This review typically consists of studying what's known about this specific reaction and similar work or transformations that can be found in patents and literature. If the project has never gone through HTS, there might be only several known conditions that have been attempted with varying success, partially due to limits in available resources. In short, at this early stage of understanding, the overall picture of potentially impactful variables might still lack focus and be somewhat jagged. Before the design for that first screening plate can be decided, two additional factors also need to be considered. First, availability of relevant structures or chemicals is crucial. In other words, there is no point in including a cool ligand with great activity that appeared in JACS in your screening if it was synthesized in a university lab and is still not commercially available. A comprehensive evaluation of available and relevant chemical space is a prerequisite to HTS planning. Second, project scientists' know-how and intuition also play an important role in deciding what to screen. Instead of being limited to only screen more familiar or known conditions, HTS opens up the possibility for scientists to test more out-of-the-box ideas. Discrete versus continuous. Normally, we will end up with a big list of potential variables to screen after the aforementioned exercise. For example, in a typical CX coupling chemistry, we might have gathered individual lists for different catalyst precursors, ligands, bases, solvents, and additives, in addition to variables such as equivalence, concentrations, temperatures, and reaction duration, time. So how do we distill them into an 8x12 plate with 96 different conditions? Generally, different variables are categorized into two groups: discrete, such as different ligands and bases, and continuous variables, such as temperature and time. Initial screening should almost always be focused on discrete variables, while fixing continuous variables, which tend to be based on known conditions, such as equivalence and temperature. Even with the focus on discrete variables during initial broad screening, the decision on which specific reagents to screen within each variable can still be daunting. In general, the guiding principle for initial screening should be broad-based, with project goals, structural diversity, and their availability in mind. Experimental design. One common screening approach after having decided on an initial set of discrete variables is via full factorial experimental design. This approach would test interaction of every combination, teasing out interesting permutations that are not obvious, thus encouraging non-intuitive discoveries. This design approach also helps with mapping out impactful variables and/or combinations, discovering clues, and observing trends. One or several known conditions should also be included as a reference or control. Under a different scenario, it might be more desirable to include more variables or reagents at once. A fractional factorial design can be used in this instance to test out more unique combinations. Generally, it is not advisable to screen more than one plate at a time, especially at the beginning of this process. Knowledge from these early plates tends to point to obvious no-nos. Doing parallel screens without this knowledge can lead to a much higher chance of wasted efforts and materials. Execution of a screen. With final experimental design in hand, we are now ready to execute our first screening plate. All aspects of a design, from chemicals needed to experimental conditions for each of the conditions, would be entered into Unchained Labs Library Studio software. A unique experimental ID will be generated at this stage, which would follow this experiment throughout the whole screening process. While Library Studio focuses on experimental details, Automation Studio translates that library design into actionable instrument control, where either FreeSlate or FreeSlate Junior would do all the heavy lifting. Actions include introducing all the necessary chemicals via solid, slurry, liquid, and viscous liquid dispense, to heating, cooling, and stirring, to preform process conditions based on experimental design. There are also more specialized technologies, such as the Optimization Sampling Reactor, OSR, and the Screening Pressure Reactor, SPR. The OSR gives researchers the capability to add reagents and withdraw samples at different pressures and temperatures during the course of the reaction. Thus, reaction profiles and other continuous variables can be looked into much more easily. The SPR, on the other hand, provides a high-throughput solution under even more challenging pressure and temperature conditions. At the end of this process, HPLC or GC analysis would typically follow to evaluate every reaction, including reference. Linked by one unique experimental ID, all experimental data that spans from initial reaction design to processing conditions and finally analytical results can be viewed, analyzed, and shared from anywhere, either immediately or years from now. Follow-up screens. Just like any research program, this process is an iterative one. There are several possible scenarios based on results from our first screening. The results might be a dud and not worth pursuing further. There might be several interesting conditions that are worth scaling up or repeating under normal benchtop conditions to confirm screening results. More discrete variable screening might be needed to finish up what was left out in earlier designs. Ideally, some of the chosen screening conditions do show promise or hit the mark, so there should be areas where further investigation should be focused. Variables or structural moieties that show the most promise should get the most attention in follow-up screenings, so structural variations within these privileged classes can be examined in greater detail. If this iterative process to narrow down the most advantageous discrete variables, such as certain combination of catalyst precursor, ligand, and solvent, is successful, continuous variables are next. At this stage, an automated high-throughput solution can also be tremendously helpful. the OSR can be utilized to probe continuous variables such as temperature, pressure, reaction progress, time, and concentrations with ease and precision. Case study. How crowded can it get? Let's dive into a case study on an early discovery program involving installing sterically challenging moieties via CC coupling chemistry. Here, the research goal was to install bulky aromatic substitutions at ortho position of a phenol. The bulkier, the better. If protecting and deprotecting the phenol group can be avoided, it would be a huge plus as well. Benchtop approach. Just like any typical project, we started this study in a traditional way by investigating several types of transformations. We first tried Negishi coupling, and the coupling was successful. The phenol group was protected by a MOM group, and the mesetyl group was the bulkiest group successfully coupled. One big drawback with this approach was the sensitivity of Zn chemistry, which led to big batch-to-batch variations. Next, we tried Suzuki coupling and again found success. Because of the more inert nature of this approach, phenol protection was not necessary, and the mesetyl group was installed with higher yield and greater consistency. High-throughput approach. We moved on to couple an even more sterically hindered 2,4,6 trisopropyl phenol group, TRIP group. Anticipating the challenging nature of this coupling, we planned a high-throughput approach to explore Suzuki coupling conditions in a more systematic fashion. We screened 2 Suzuki coupling-focused plates using TRIP boronic acid with varying PD catalysts, phosphine ligands, bases, and solvents. But unfortunately, no promising lead appeared, and the Suzuki coupling route was dropped. The next HTS strategy was to apply more active Kumada coupling chemistry. More basic Grignard reagents would be involved. Instead of using more precious Grignard reagents, we introduced a basic variable, NaH and MEmgCl in the first plate, to deprotonate the phenol group first, forming corresponding salts. The first screen also included both TRIP-MgBr and pH-MgCl to evaluate the desired transformation from both ends of the steric spectrum. We laid out all chosen discrete variables in an 8x12 grid for ease of visualization, and prepared all the chemicals, including necessary stock solutions. We then put this information and all experimental procedures into Library Studio, which automatically generated a unique experimental ID. Using that ID, Automation Studio could extract all the required information from Library Studio to execute the screen. Data analysis. Still linked by that initial experimental ID, all GC data was saved to a central database through Lab Execution and Analysis software suite, Unchained Labs Enterprise Data Solution. Product conversions were then calculated based on the GC area percentage between product and overall areas. The clear standout was well A7, which achieved the highest product conversion to form TRIP adduct without the use of any ligands. The result was unexpected, but very exhilarating to see. We immediately ran 2 follow-up plates to investigate this ligand-free condition further. Follow-up screens. The first follow-up screening was focused on probing the extent of the ligand-free condition by using different Grignard reagents with different steric requirements. We also investigated other non-PD-based catalyst precursors. The results clearly confirmed the trend between the size of the Grignard reagents and their ability to successfully couple to O-bromophenol without the presence of any ligands. The bulkier the Grignard, such as mesetyl and TRIP groups, the better. Unfortunately, non-PD-based catalyst precursors appeared inferior, and PD-based catalysts are generally required for this transformation. With the extent of this ligand-free Kumada coupling understood, we planned a second follow-up screen of different discrete variables in search of less expensive catalysts and higher yield. The results clearly shown. Firstly, less costly PDCl2 can successfully catalyze the desired coupling. Second, NaH, thus Na salt, provides the best starting point. And thirdly, there is little solvent effect when using Na phenolic salt as starting material. Scale up. Finally, the screen results were confirmed by performing benchtop chemistry using NaH as deprotonating base and PDCl2 as the catalyst, the best discrete variables discovered. The reaction was done in a microwave reactor for a much quicker conversion, 5 minutes at 170 degrees Celsius. The isolated yield, at 94%, was even better than what was observed during the secondary screen. Since the project was in its early discovery stage, and because the goal to insert a very sterically hindered aromatic substitute at ortho position of a phenol was resoundingly successful, we did not pursue investigation of continuous variables to further refine reaction conditions. Conclusion. High-throughput reaction screening enables scientists to systematically explore relevant reaction variables and achieve process optimization in an iterative fashion. This approach involves first optimizing with respect to discrete variables, followed by further optimization of continuous variables. The case study presented here illustrates the importance of approaching a problem in this iterative fashion. Our goal was to install a bulky aromatic group at ortho position of a phenol. Initial benchtop chemistry using either Negishi or Suzuki coupling was partially successful. We then introduced an automated high-throughput approach to explore a broad set of relevant discrete variables in order to install a very sterically challenging trip group. After 4 rounds of such screening, exploring 2 types of transformations and many different variables, the trip group was successfully coupled at ortho phenol position, without needing a protecting group or any ligands. A successful high-throughput approach to reaction screening requires both sound science and its seamless integration with encompassing software and robust, flexible automation hardware. Unchained Labs reaction screening and catalyst optimization workflows for automated high-throughput reaction screening, including OSR and SPR technology, can allow scientists to increase the number of experiments they can perform, while also improving the fidelity and traceability of their data. Scientists can comprehensively view and analyze all relevant data from initial design to analytics linked by a single experimental ID, immediately or years from now. The workflows enabled by technology such as FreeSlate or Junior are compatible with a wide range of reactions and backed by Unchained Labs' many years of industry experience and domain knowledge. This white paper was sponsored and provided by Unchained Labs. Unchained Labs is a life sciences tools company who are all about helping biologics researchers. They aim to provide problem-tackling products that make a huge difference in the real science researchers do every day. Unchained Labs are headquartered near Silicon Valley in Pleasanton, California, and have offices in Boston, Newark, London, Brussels, Berlin, Tokyo, and Shanghai. If you'd like to learn more about Unchained Labs, then you can visit their website unchainedlabs.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, then you can find links to this white paper, including figures and illustrations, in the show notes. And you're also able to view other DDW white papers in the white paper section of our website. If you've enjoyed the podcast, then do subscribe and leave us a review, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for updates about DDW. Thank you for listening, and we'll hope to see you in our next episode.